Welcome into Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we recap the very first game of Philadelphia Phillies spring training, the one that was on TV against the New York Yankees, and some nice takeaways from the first action down in Clearwater.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Odyssey app, Spotify, Apple Music, all that good stuff. Check us out. Subscribe on YouTube. You know the deal. You know it helps us out. It's quick to subscribe. I really appreciate everyone who has already. Man, it's a great time to cover the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm watching everything down in spring training. I'm talking about it on 97.5 The Fanatic over on the radio side, NBC Sports Philadelphia on the television side. It's a really, really good time to be a Philadelphia Phillies fan, media member, anything right now, a member of the organization. And we got our first glimpse at what the 2023 Phillies are going to look like. Kind of. It was spring training, so there's only so much you can look into. I'm going to start by prefacing it with this. Saw a bunch of tweets over the weekend about spring training games, and look at everybody jumping to conclusions about this is what the people were saying, jumping to conclusions about what a team's going to be or what a player's going to be, or making these big sweeping general statements about spring training games. I get it's spring training. It's like any other preseason. It's whatever. It's not really anything crazy. No one's really – you have guys on the bubble trying to make the roster, and those guys are important, what they do. But especially game one, it's not a great indicator of what people are going to do all season or anything like that. But what it is an opportunity to gain little nuggets, little tidbits about exactly what's going on with some Philadelphia Phillies players, the team in general. Got some fun stuff said in interviews during the game. You get a unique look at the players because they're more accessible during the broadcasts of these spring training games because they have less to focus on. Starters are getting pulled in like the 5th, 6th inning. So there is some stuff to learn. I want you to know, I'm not saying anything about the Phillies are going to win the World Series or this player is going to be awesome or this player is going to stink or this, that, and the other thing. These are just statements for what they're worth. One spring training game in. But there was some interesting stuff going on yesterday. I will talk in a later episode about the matchup with the Detroit Tigers that went on in Lakeland, Florida, which was the away game of the split squad yesterday. But I'm going to talk first about the one I watched with my own two eyes on television on NBC Sports Philadelphia, which was the Phillies matchup with the New York Yankees that they ended up winning. And it was a fun game. There were some good moments by young players. De La Cruz had a home run to center field. The 6'8", first baseman, made a nice play up against the net, too. Good afternoon for him. Weston Wilson had 4 RBIs, but a 2-run homer and a 2-run double in the game. So he was probably your big performer. You got to see a couple bullpen arms. Andrew Baker was a guy that got a lot of attention, throws hard, that some people are looking at as a potential to break into the bullpen at some point this year or some point in the future. All that stuff's fun and good. I'm going to try and keep this to a look at a couple of the players that are actually going to be on the Major League roster and are going to be impact makers on the Major League roster. The first one I'm going to look at is Brandon Marsh. He was one of the highlights of the game yesterday. I'm recording this on Sunday, so it was Saturday. Woo! Sorry about that. Man, sneezing. Sorry if I just blew out someone's eardrums on that one. But anyway, Brandon Marsh had a nice day at the dish. Had a couple nice plays in center field. He went 2 for 2 with a walk at the plate, and the 2 hits, I believe they both came on the first pitches of the at-bat. One, I think the broadcast was still coming back from commercial, and he was already like in the middle of swinging and hitting a single the opposite way. I believe it was his second at-bat. It was a good performance by Brandon Marsh. I'm not here to tell you Brandon Marsh is going to hit 300 this year or going to be an offensive powerhouse or anything like that. And I think he slots in really well at the bottom of the lineup. I don't think he's going to be higher than that often, partially because of the strength of this Phillies lineup, partially because I think he fits in really well down there with his speed as what people call the second leadoff hitter. But Brandon Marsh, one of the big questions when he came over from the Los Angeles Angels, you knew his ceiling as a defender is a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. That's his ceiling. He can get there. That's realistic. But the offense was questionable. What is this guy going to bring at the plate? He didn't really hit consistently in Los Angeles, had some trouble with it in the minors. Can he turn into a guy who's an average to slightly above average hitter at the major league level? Because that would really make him a valuable player. If you're going to get plus defense from somebody, you can live with okay offense. But if you get plus defense and above average offense, that turns into an important piece on a championship caliber team. That can be a difference maker. We saw him in the playoffs last year already make differences at the plate. A big hit, a big home run, rather, in that series against the Atlanta Braves. So he showed flashes last year. But the swing, again, it just looked so much smoother, so a lot more compact. And he seems more comfortable with the changes that the Phillies tried to make with him last year, and specifically Kevin Long, hitting coach Kevin Long, tried to make with Brandon Marsh this past season. So one of the things you notice when Brandon Marsh came here from the Angels, it's something that Bryson Stott tried to work on throughout the year too. His swing just had a little too much going on. It was kind of not clunky is not the right word, but just not as smooth as it should look. It was too long. He needed a little bit to shorten the swing path, shorten his front side a little bit so he wasn't taking as big of a step. Brandon Marsh is never going to be a power hitter at the major league level, but he's a guy that you want to see hit like 280. Would be a great year for Brandon Marsh this year if he was able to hit that 280 mark and play plus defense. We know he's got wheels and everything like that. Well, in those two hits yesterday, you saw two at-bats where, well, two swings really, where he looked very compact, looked very quick to the ball, quick through the zone, not as long of a swing. And I know the thought process is keep the barrel of the bat through the zone as long as possible, but a long swing is one that indicates slow hands. It indicates not catching up to the faster stuff. And he was looking really, really good in that aspect yesterday. Now, he told us he was interviewed after live during the game while he was on the bench after he got taken out. And he said that this offseason he lived relatively close to where Kevin Long, hitting coach, lives. And they got together over the offseason a good amount and worked on stuff. This is what I've been telling you guys about. Now, I didn't know that until he said it on the broadcast, but I did say this is going to be interesting to see what the first offseason plan for Brandon Marsh was like for Kevin Long, the first spring training with the Philadelphia Phillies, and how that affects it. It was a small sample size, of course, but you can already see that Brandon Marsh is buying in, that Kevin Long has worked with him, and that they're taking a very specific approach to what he needs to do better at the plate. I thought Brandon Marsh was a plus offensively down the stretch last year after he got traded here from Los Angeles. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be a plus this year. He needs to continue to work on stuff. He needs to get more consistent and comfortable with the new approach and the new swing mechanics and everything like that. And yesterday was our first glimpse at him doing that. He seemed to work really well. Seems like a really coachable player. Seems like Kevin Long really knows what he's doing with him. And that pairing between Brandon Marsh and Kevin Long, well, we saw yesterday that it's paying off a little bit. Now, it doesn't matter in a spring training game against the Yankees where they're throwing minor leaguers and everything like that. And they were both right-handed pitchers that he got hits off of, so we haven't seen him against a lefty yet. And that was Marsh's kryptonite last year. And Matt Vierling would come in and start games where that you'd have a lefty on the mound because left-handed batter having trouble hitting left-handed pitching. That'll be the real benchmark of whether or not Brandon Marsh can be a plus hitter at the major league level. But the little bit that we saw yesterday from Brandon Marsh was a good thing. And it's credit to him and it's credit to Kevin Long. And it shows you just why these players love Kevin Long, type of coaching he gives them, everything going on there. So that was a really great thing to see. And our first positive of spring training was Brandon Marsh. Now, coming up, I'm going to talk about a guy who I think is going to be on the major league roster, but is not going to be a starter, and why I really think Philadelphia is going to love this guy in the 2023 season. We'll discuss coming up next as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let me talk to you about my friends over at Built Bar, right? You're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories. You got to try Built Bar. It's absolutely awesome. You're trying to get ready for your summer body. All our goals are to eat a little healthier all the time. Well, you got to try Built because it's actually healthy for you. It's tasty. Man, they're amazing. Listen to some of these flavors. Churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. It's covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, real chocolate, not any fake, it kind of tastes like chocolate, but you can tell it's a protein bar. And the numbers on it, the macros, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein, That hits all the important things and takes out some of the bad stuff. It's a great bar for you to have. It tastes like a candy bar, works like a protein bar. And now you don't have to wait to order them at built.com. You can get them in person at Walmart. You can get them in person at Sam's Club if you want to get them in bulk, a 13-bar box available at Sam's Club. So you can get them locally besides having to order online. Trust me, you got to try Built Bar. They taste great. They work great. They're part of my workout routine every week is crushing a couple Built Bars to get my body where I want it to be. Take my word for it. Go ahead and check it out. You'll get your summer body all squared away while having a great tasting treat to do it with. Let's talk a little bit about Josh Harrison and why I think the Philadelphia Phillies are absolutely going to love him. You saw a little bit of why Josh Harrison's on this team yesterday. Now, he had a nice double in the game, so the swing was good. He's a veteran. He knows how to play at this level. He's going to be on the major league roster. I totally believe that. I don't think there's any chance that he ends up in Lehigh or anything like that. Edmundo Sosa is going to get the nod over him as the top utility guy in the infield, and maybe top utility guy in the outfield too. That'll be interesting to see with Sosa. But Harrison made a couple nice plays. He had a jumping catch on a line drive. He had that double. He played really solid, clean defense. It was a little bit of an example, and we'll talk about Edmundo Sosa too, why those two guys are hugely important to this team because they are plus defense as reserves. That's important. Last year, Edmundo Sosa, you could argue, was your best infield defender. He barely played. Like, he played down the stretch, but he wasn't an everyday starter by any stretch of the imagination. Well, now you have Trey Turner. Bryson Stott's back at his more natural position at second base. Alec Boehm hopefully continues to improve as defender, and Rhys Hoskins, will see what he is defensively. But you have two guys in the reserves, on the bench that are plus defenders, Edmundo Sosa and Josh Harrison. And one, I think the Phillies have been so lacking in infield defense for a couple years now that anybody who plays plus defense at the major league level is going to be a welcome sight. But also Josh Harrison, you can tell he's, it's funny because they're both former Pirates, but he reminds me a little bit of Andrew McCutchen. He won't give you as much at the dish as McCutchen did. And McCutchen, of course, at his peak was an MVP. But Harrison has got like that. He's got that swagger to him. He's got that coolness. He plays the game in a fun way. He's expressive and everything like that. Like, not an edge, but in that he'll do some funny stuff. Like, there was one where Jake Cave made a play down the left field line and made a beautiful throw to second base to throw out the runner that was trying to stretch a single into a double. And Harrison makes the tag, and he kind of like fell over to make the tag. And then he's sitting there. He just like randomly like tosses the ball backwards over his head to send it around the horn. Just little stuff like that. Like, maybe your average major leaguer gets up and just flicks it over like normal. He plays the game with a little bit of flair. Not quite to like a Javi Baez level, but he plays with personality. We love that in Philadelphia. Guys that play, that show their personality, that have fun, that mess around, that smile, that do a little like quirky, fun things on the field. Not that he's not serious when he plays, but you couple that in with the defense and playing the game in the right way and everything like that, like a true veteran who's been around the game and been at this level for a while. And that's a guy that the Philadelphia Phillies fans can really look forward to having on our side this year. He's going to be fun to watch. I don't know the number of innings he gets, but when he's out there, I don't see Josh Harrison as a guy that's going to hurt this team. And that's what backup players should be. They should have a definitive skill set or one definitive skill that makes them valuable. They should do that well consistently. And then the other things, like if they're good defensively, like Josh Harrison, they just have to not kill you offensively. I don't think he will. I don't know they'll give you anything crazy special at the plate, but I think he's just going to be a guy that adds consistent defense off the bench on off days, is a nice piece, and it really, really helps you out. Now, I know Didi Gregorius might not be the best example, right? But think about Didi Gregorius from like 2 years ago, before he started to fall apart and had elbow issues and all that stuff, and what he brought to the team, and now move that guy to the bench. That would have been a huge improvement. If you had like a Trey Turner above that, and then he was a bench piece, we would have liked Didi a lot more than what we did as a starting shortstop for this team. Think of Josh Harrison kind of as that type of guy. And it's an improvement over what the Phillies had depth-wise last year. Like, he's better than Nick Maton is right now. He's better than Scott Kingery. Guys like that. Like, Josh Harrison's a bona fide major leaguer. And the way he plays the game, I think Philly is really going to like it. Edmundo Sosa showed off some defense as well. The way he plays shortstop is just, it's textbook. And I know you got Trey Turner there, so he's not going to see a lot of time at shortstop. Sosa is. Turner will be there basically every day. But his motions to the ball, the way he fields the ball out in front of him, like there's been so many guys in Phillies uniforms in the infield that seem like they're getting eaten up by like every single ground ball hit to him. Hoskins is one. Bohm used to be one. Guys like that. It would happen to Didi Gregorius sometimes. Other guys you had at the middle, Kingery, it seems like the ball is playing them more often than it should. No, Sosa just has great motions to the ball. Glove out in front, fields like a real infielder. He just looks like a shortstop that can field at a plus level, and we know that about him already. But your two reserves in the infield, you're in a really good spot as far as infield depth. And you had Derek Hall hitting the game. He didn't do really anything at the plate, but it's another guy that hitting-wise could be a part of this team as an infield backup. The depth with this Phillies team, I think, is what separates this year's team from last year's team. The outfield, you still have to work out. I'll hit that point forever and a day until Bryce Harper comes back. But the infield's in a really good spot, and it's because of two of those guys that you saw have nice games yesterday for the Philadelphia Phillies. Jake Cave is a guy I want to talk about a little bit as well here, because he made that nice throw into second base. It was, especially as a lefty, having to go basically turn 180 from the left field line and kind of make a blind spinning throw to second base right on the money to get a base runner trying to stretch it. That was a nice play. I think he had a hit in the game. He also had an opportunity to dive for one and left that he didn't quite get to. He's not a plus defender, but if he can make average plays defensively and gives you a left-handed bat that can sometimes leave the yard and has major league experience at the plate, maybe they're not as bad off in the outfield as I thought they would be. And that makes me more confident that Jalen Ortiz and Johan Rojas are not part of the plan, barring any major injuries or anything, for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2023. But a nice opening game for Jake Cave, too, who looked comfortable. So that's another look at a depth piece that you say, okay, this is a guy that doesn't look out of place. That's what you want from these reserve guys. You just don't want them to look out of place. Mickey Moniak at points looked like, when he was here before he got sent to the Angels, he looked like a guy that didn't belong at the major league level. I know it's only one game, but early impressions are these guys look like they can handle their own at the major league level. And that's all you can ask from reserves. Some guys are plus reserves, like Sosa and Harrison. Some guys are guys that you're just going to have to live with, but I'm slightly encouraged by what I saw out of Jake Cave. And we already saw a little bit of Dalton Guthrie at the major league level last year, so at least he has that experience under his belt. We'll see what he looks like throughout the spring. But there were not a lot of negatives with the Philadelphia Phillies yesterday. The only one I can take has to deal with the starting pitcher of yesterday's game. I want to talk about something the broadcast brought up with him and a little bit about what Nick Nelson did yesterday that I didn't totally love, but I can't totally fault him for. We'll discuss coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. All right, so Nick Nelson started yesterday's game. And Tom McCarthy on the TV broadcast said that Nelson's in the conversation. He'll be in the battle for one of the rotation spots in 2023. Now, what I think that means is if you go to a six-man rotation, there could be a spot start or two in there for Nick Nelson. I don't think that means he has any shot, even an outside chance of being the fifth starter on this team. Like, no way. He's probably fourth or fifth man down on the chances of getting that spot behind Painter and Falter and Sanchez and other people. Like, maybe he's fourth, but I don't see any world where he's in the actual rotation. Maybe he's part of the six-man rotation if an injury happens and it's not Painter, Falter, and then the top four guys we know to be Nola, Wheeler, Suarez, and Walker. But what bothered me with Nick Nelson, I know it's his first start of the year and pitchers are working on stuff and everything like that. The fastball was elevated a lot. You can work on a bunch of things in spring training, but normally it's off speed. Normally it's certain type of locations. I don't think it's very normal to have guys working on high fastballs because that's where you get crushed, especially if you're a guy like Nick Nelson that doesn't throw all that hard. So if he's going to be an important part of this team, he doesn't have plus stuff. He's got to be a location guy. His location wasn't great yesterday. It's not, oh, alarms are going off, red flag, send Nick Nelson down to Lehigh Valley. I'm just saying that's the reason why I don't consider him a real contender to be in the rotation, even if it's a six-man rotation. He'll probably be your long man in the bullpen. And that's fine. And to have a guy that you're comfortable with potentially starting as your long man in the bullpen speaks to the depth of that unit as well. There's nothing that I've seen from Nick Nelson in his time in Philly, and there was nothing that I saw yesterday in his first start of the year. Again, totally saying that, but when I watch Nick Nelson this spring, it will not be maybe this guy can break into the rotation conversation. It'll just be hey, get loose, get ready to be in the pen, because I don't think he has a real legitimate shot at being any type of rotation arm for this team. He just doesn't, with the talent and quality of starting pitchers you have in this organization, he doesn't look like a guy that fits that mold to me. So will he be on the team? Probably. Will he be in the rotation? I'm going to say 100% no. I just don't see it from Nick Nelson. And that was the only real negative takeaway that I had from the Phillies-Yankees matchup yesterday down in Clearwater. I know it's base level stuff. Again, it's not any sweeping generalities or anything like this guy's going to be great this year, this guy's going to stink this year. It's just minor observations from a small sample size that we got yesterday, but it's fun to break down because we had live baseball. How fun is that? Who doesn't love live baseball, right? And that's what we got yesterday. We get it again today, too. Trey Turner will bat leadoff, and the Phillies have a lot of starters going today. So in tomorrow's episode, I'll be able to break down some more fun stuff as we talk about what our first look at Trey Turner in a Phillies uniform looked like and some of the other guys that are going to be starting for this team, how they looked and how they start off their spring. We'll discuss that on the next episode of Locked On Phillies. But that's all for today's episode. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects next with your second listen. Lindsey Crosby does great work with them. He knows everything about every prospect, for real. The guy's an encyclopedia. Go ahead and check out his work. Also available wherever you get your podcasts, available on YouTube. We did a great crossover earlier in the month. You can check that out on either of our YouTube pages. So go ahead and give some love to Lindsey Crosby on Locked On MLB Prospects. Does amazing work. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On Phillies. Make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, all that good stuff. And I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.